Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron. My hope for this message is to convince you that what you are going through is ordained by God, or God is allowing it for your benefit, and that God is in the midst of your trial. When I realized this, that my trial, what I was going through, was ordained by God, and that God was in it all, that served as my shining star of hope. And the moment I figured this out, and I hope you figured this out, is when I was reading Handbook to Happiness by Charles Solomon, and I saw myself in it. So once I saw myself in the trial, or in the book, I realized that quite possibly God is using this and engineered it for my good. And I started hoping. And the main part that helped me the most, or the starting point, was in that book when he started describing the devil's tactics on how he torments us. And he was going off a checklist basically, and I was saying check, 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 check. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I am being attacked by evil spirits, and God is in this all, and He's bringing me to the end of myself for my good and His glory. So I pray to God that you see that too, because once you get that hope, that is the turning point of your trial. It's like seeing a bright North Star, the North Star out in while you're in the middle of a storm. There's lightning, rain, and winds beating down on you. It was pitch dark, but once you see that star, it doesn't bother you as much. All the storms and all that stuff, it doesn't bother you as much, and you just head towards that star. And that is the turning point. And the New Testament, what I share, a lot of is the truth that you can hang on to, and the reality of what we have in Jesus and the promises that we have in Him. And the Old Testament for me, and hopefully for you, are like good examples of how these men and women lived out their lives with these truths. Even though these truths are, New Testament, a lot of these people like Gideon, King David, Joseph, those guys, Moses, they've been living it out, thousands of years before these truths were revealed. Jesus is in the entire Bible, the Old and New Testament. And like, for example, Romans 8:28, God uses everything for our good. You can see how God uses everything for the good of His children in the Old Testament. And it's beautiful. And today I want to share something that hopefully convinces you that God is in the midst of your trial, and that it's totally normal, and that God will rescue you in His perfect timing. A quick example, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but is Gideon. And at the time, the Israelites were oppressed by the Midianites and some other clans for 7 years. And so it took 7 years of torment by these enemy forces for them to finally come to a helpless state before God and saying, God, we need help. We're crying out for help. And so some of you might be suffering that long. However long it is required, God will allow you to suffer that long. And when God finally called Gideon, He told him to go and save his people. And so Gideon went out against, first collected his army, and there were about, I think it was 32,000 soldiers. But what is that compared to the enemy forces, which the Bible doesn't say the exact number, but they said their camels alone was like just uncountable. The men you can't count. It's just a sea of them. So 32,000 was probably very tiny compared to their army. Yet God, in Judges 7, chapter 7, verse 2 says, you have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that their own strength saved her. I want you to pay attention to this. This is key to what's happening with you. God is saying 32,000 is too many, even though the enemy might be 10 times, 100 times, I don't know how many times bigger. And God's saying, that's too many people. Doesn't really make sense when like a worldly person looks at that. And God dwindles it down from 32,000 to 10,000 to 300 men against just probably hundreds of thousands. So God does that to us, and that is what He's doing to you at this time of intense trial for you. He's stripping you of your resources. He's saying, You still have too many resources in order for me to give you victory over your flesh so that you can live an abundant life in me, so that you can learn to surrender and trust me. You still have too much. You have maybe too much willpower, maybe money, maybe too much health, just too much confidence in the flesh, and God will strip you. And until you just know that it has to be God that's going to save you. Gideon here has 300 men, and so he was at a point where if God didn't do it, there's no way they could possibly win, and everybody knew it. All of Israel knew it. 300 men versus hundreds of thousands. I'm guessing that number. I don't know the exact number. So God will put you in that situation of impossible, like odds. There's no way you can do it. And God needs to come through for you. And that's the beauty of your trial. He will come through for you, and you will acknowledge that it was God, and that all your strength and hope comes from Jesus alone. That's the only way. Because if Gideon had all 32,000 men, they could have said, we did it with our strength and cleverness. But God, He knows what He's doing. And I want you to step back one chapter in Judges 6, verses 14 through 16. When God called Gideon to go free his people from the Midianites, what did he request? What did he tell Gideon to do? Like, what did he require of him? So 14 says, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. That's it. Just go as you are. He already has God's grace for him, saying your strength right now you have is enough. And of course, the human side of Gideon, or us, comes out in the next verse 15. But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. And so you're struggling with this trial, and God's saying, my grace is enough for you. And then you're saying, like Gideon, God, I can't do it. I don't have the resources. I don't have the strength. I'm weak. How am I supposed to overcome this trial in my life? And in verse 16, here's the answer. The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together. That's the answer. He's with you, and He will do it all. Whether it's mental illness or an impossible looking circumstance, God's answer is go in the strength that you have, and you will succeed because I am with you. So what is there to do at this point from you? Just trust in Him and move forward. Continue life in the way you believe God wants you to, and surrender, saying, God, this is your battle, not mine. And just like how God gave Gideon victory in a way that cannot be even argued, the way Gideon beat his enemy was that his 300 men blew trumpets and smashed jars on the ground. That's it. And God had the Midianites and all those forces turn against each other. And they started killing each other. God gave him the victory completely, and He will give you the victory completely. We can learn so much from these saints that's already lived, thousands of years ago, but the trials are very similar. You have to trust in God. You have to surrender it all. And go in the strength that you have, knowing that His grace is enough for you, and that He is always with you. The Lord answered in verse 16, I will be with you. Now go strike down the Midianites. God saying, I will be with you. Now take on these circumstances. Go in faith that I am fighting for you, and everything will be okay. So I hope you could be encouraged. And also I pray to God that you see this as your shining hope, that God is in the midst of your trial, that He is the one who allowed this to happen, and He is stripping you of the resources that you have and your perceived control, and God is showing that He is the faithful one, that He is your source of life and your hope, that you should not depend on anything but God. So continue the fight and endure and rest in this truth, and may God be your shining star of hope. God bless you.